All right, it's 7:30. We'll begin the meeting. Call the meeting to order. And the minutes, everyone has had a chance to look at. There were some suggested changes by Tim. With the accepted changes, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Richard, I was just going to make one more.
Go ahead, please.
I think under Goomer Hollow, the board agreed we were going to do a site visit, and I just didn't see that here. Specifically, we talked about...
I think my recollection was that because it's accessible from the road, that everyone could go by on their own, right from the road.
Okay.
Yep.
So you don't think we need to add that here? Okay.
Yep. Any other comments on the minutes? If not, can I have a motion to accept the minutes?
Second.
Okay, I move it, and so second by Catherine. All in favor?
All right.
And the minutes are approved. All right, under new business, case 976, Jeff Baker. And if you could state your name and address, please.
Yes, good evening. Good evening. My name is Rob DuPont. I'm representing Mr. Baker tonight. He's out of town. The reason we're here before you tonight is Mr. Baker is looking to build a new house on his property at 1010 Route 308. It's about a 24-acre parcel.
Excuse me, are you an architect, an engineer, a builder?
Yeah, I'm an architect.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Don't I look like an architect?
You do, yes.
Anyway, the reason that I'm here representing Mr. Baker is there's an existing small single-family house on the property. The area where he wants to build his new house, and he wants to maintain the existing small house that's there, there's a section in the zoning ordinance that states that the primary dwelling, which will be the new one that we hope to build, will not be closer to the road than the secondary dwelling. Therefore, an area variance was necessary. Both buildings are very far from 308. You can't even see them. The one that's closer is about 570 feet, I think, and the proposed is almost 900 feet away.
Okay. And could you describe the existing accessory building? What is it comprised of?
Well, it's a small house. I'm not exactly sure how old it is. I think it's 600 square feet. It's relatively small. There's also a detached garage building next to it.
And is that occupied now?
Yeah, it is. It's a rental, and he'd like to keep it as a rental property.
Oh, I thought I saw in the application that the front building would not be rented. Maybe I didn't see that.
It won't be a caretaker's cottage, but there will be somebody renting it. Mr. Baker owns it, and someone will be renting it, yeah.
Okay. And it has its own septic?
It does, yeah. In fact, the proposed residents were in the process of getting septic approved from the Dutchess County Board of Health. The first round has already been reviewed, and comments were made, and it's been resubmitted. So we expect to get approval for that.
And that'll be a separate system?
It is, yes.
Okay.
It's actually indicated on the map. You can see it.
I don't see this, the septic field. I see the force main.
Yep.
But then I see the well in the same direction as the...
Here's the proposed house, and up here...
Existing. Yeah.
Right there.
So you're going to pump all the way down?
All the way up. Yeah. Yeah. So
All the
here's
way up, I see.
Yeah. Existing house, existing field, and existing reserve, and these are the proposed new
Wow,
field
that's
and
far.
reserve.
Okay.
It is far. The only good news is, well, we have to get away from Sapasco. That's why we have to do it. But the Rhinebeck gravel in here is excellent, so it perked very well. So it's a great place for a septic system.
Gotcha.
Are there any other questions on this application? Tim, there's a larger map over here. Yeah, good.
Yeah, but this one's in color, too.
Okay.
We still have to catch up with the planning board and get everything on a big screen, but we're working on that.
Will there be a laser pointer, too?
Yes, there
Oh,
will.
boy.
You want to assign this one too, Richard?
What's it?
You want to assign?
Yes. Yes, would anyone like to volunteer to handle the, okay, Tim, thank you. I have a question for the attorneys. It's an ongoing question that I ask. It has to do with zoning being one family or two family, and if this is two family, is that a problem? But I don't know what the zoning is.
Okay, it's going to be an accessory dwelling, it meets the definition of an accessory dwelling structure.
I'm going back to like zoning 101, where you have a one-family house or one-family zone, and you can't have a rental if your property is zoned one family, is my understanding.
Okay, you might remember when Brennan Carney's application was in.
I do.
We talked about that. In Rhinebeck, so there'll be a primary use of this property. Think back to the Wheel application also. So there'll be a primary use of this property, which will be the residential home to be constructed. And then you're allowed to have accessory uses, a variety of different accessory uses, one of which is accessory residential dwelling. And that's what is proposed for the cottage for this property.
Okay, thank you. So in the code, it says that, and that does not exclude renting. That the renting is, no, it doesn't say renting, it says accessory residential use. So not by the same owner for their mother-in-law.
And actually, the word tenant is actually mentioned. A guest cottage is another.
Okay, oh, good, okay.
Option, and it's actually mentioned in the code, so I think the rental is contemplated by the
Thank you.
zoning there.
I think you said in the Brennan case that the primary dwelling had to be occupied by the owner
Yes.
for at least X amount of time during the year. Okay.
Good. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, do I have a motion to accept this application if there's no further questions?
Motion?
Thank you, Dave. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Yay.
Aye.
Thank you. I have a motion to schedule a public hearing.
Motion made?
Thank you. A second?
Second.
A second. All in favor of the motion to schedule a public hearing? Aye?
Yes.
Okay.
what's it-
Any opposed?
What would be
No.
the date for that?
Okay.
February 20th.
Thank you. Chris?
I'll send you the information for the public hearing tomorrow.
Great, thanks, Chris.
And two more motions. A motion for the secret designation. Again, I'll defer to the attorneys on that.
It should be a type 2 action because it's a granting of an area variance for a single-family residence. So that would be 617.5C13. So it's type 2, it doesn't require any further environmental review.
Thank you, Kim. And finally,
Do you want to make?
oh, I'm sorry, make a motion to accept that, please.
Motion made?
Thank you again. Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor of that designation?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay. All were in favor. And finally, a motion for referrals. I'll again defer to the attorneys as to whether we need Dutchess County Planning Board, Rhinebeck Planning Board, CAB, or WAC.
The only referrals that would be required would be to the Rhinebeck Planning Board. It's a residential use, so it doesn't require Dutchess County planning. It's not open space, so it doesn't require CAB, and it's not in the LWRP. So just to Rhinebeck Planning Board.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, sir, thank you. Do you have any questions?
No?
All right, thank you for coming, and you're scheduled for next month for a public hearing.
Great, thank you.
Okay. And that date is fine with you?
Oh, yeah, February 20th is
Good.
fine, yep.
Okay, very good.
Make arrangements for a site visit now or wait till after the public hearing?
I think on this, maybe we'll do it now.
Richard?
Yes, I'll be happy to go, yeah.
You need to be Chapter?
Yep.
When would you like to go?
We can do it now, because that makes it easier for us if you want. Well, we might have to do it by email. And if you could leave, your phone number is in the application? I'll get it from,
Chris has my email.
Chris, I'll get it from Chris, and we'll get a date together.
Okay, yeah, next week I'm very flexible, so.
Excellent.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, next is a public hearing scheduled for 7:45 on Groomer Hollow LLC. Is anyone here to participate in that public hearing? Thank you, thank you. And thank you there, okay. All right, why don't we, again, briefly present what you, not the whole application, but just briefly present what you have, and then we'll ask for comments from the public. This is a continuation of the public hearing.
So I think everybody that's here for the applicant and also for the neighbors was also here last time, as was the board, so we'll be brief. So this is a request for an interpretation to a ZEO letter, which stated that she thought that a rooftop community solar system needed to be screened under 125-47I-14. And we think that that's not correct, that she made an error there, and we'll explain why. So basically what we're talking about is rooftop solar systems that would cover the entire roofs of two agricultural buildings that are, the longest one is about 440 feet long and about 26 feet high at its top. There's also a hay barn, which would be the third building. They all face perfectly south. They have wonderful exposure for solar, and right now the roofs are green. So when we cover them with solar, they'll become blue. The solar panels will be compliant with the law in that they won't stick up higher than 8 inches above the surface. In fact, they'll be about 6 inches above the surface. So they're parallel and very close to the existing roofs. They don't extend beyond the edges of the roofs, which is required by the solar zoning law for rooftop systems. Solar panels, because they're designed with anti-reflective glass, they're designed to absorb light, not reflect it, and a lot of technology goes into the chemistry of that glass. The glare, as I said last time, from solar panels is actually less than it would be from a metal roof, like the green metal roof. So the glare will go down while the color changes from green to blue. Under the solar zoning law, if Mike DeCola was to put a system, or anybody, on the roof of their house, there would be absolutely no requirement to screen it anywhere in the town. The only exception would be in the hamlet of Rhinecliff, where it would have to go through a site plan review. But you could put any rooftop solar system anywhere else in the town and have no requirement to screen it, according to the way the law is written. But because this is a community system, the different section applies, and it's that section about, section 14 about screening that we think is not as clear as it should be. Interestingly, if Mike was to cover half of one of these roofs with solar panels for his own use on the property, we would not need planning board approval, we would not need a variance from the ZBA, we would not need an interpretation. A building permit would be pretty close to automatic. And another interesting thing is that on January 1st, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation passed a new seeker Type 2 category that automatically declares all solar systems that are placed on the roofs of existing structures to be Type 2 actions. So the state policy continues to move in the direction that it's trying to encourage rooftop and other solar. So the reason why we think the law is not clear is because in the very same section I, there's several other requirements regarding community solar systems where it's not specified whether or not the section is applying to a roof system or a ground system, but it's obviously applying to a ground system. It just didn't say that, and we think the same situation exists in 14. So there's a section about fencing, requiring fencing around community solar systems. We think it doesn't specify if that's for roof or ground, but clearly we don't think it applies to roof. It would be absurd to require fencing around a rooftop, a solar system, or a building just because it happened to be on a roof. There's another section, I think it's section 15, immediately after 14 with regards to screening, which is talking about, what is it? Height. Talks about maximum height. And it says that the maximum height of a community solar system, no part of the solar panel, of a solar panel in a community solar system can be above 12 feet. So that's clearly what the law should have said, is it should have clarified that no ground-mounted solar system should be 12 feet. And there's a reason for that, so that they don't, stick up in the air and be seen. But when a roof is already there, and all roofs are higher than 12 feet, it kind of, I don't think it makes sense. And so that section we think also should have specified that it applied to ground-mounted systems only, but it doesn't. And similarly, we think the same thing should apply to rooftop systems. The ability to screen a system of this size is basically zero. I mean, it's impossible to screen a system of this size. The buildings are too high. The buildings are too long. The cost even to put up a half dozen tall trees to provide spot screening would destroy the profitability of the project. I ran this business, Hudson Solar, that before we merged and became Suncommon. I ran my business for 15 years here in Rhinebeck. We were profitable every single year of those 15 years, but we never made more than 4% profit. And in the worst years, it was 0.5%, and in the average years, it was about 2%. And to add cost of even a half dozen tall trees to provide some spot screening so that if someone was standing here, but maybe not to the side, they wouldn't see this, that would eliminate the profitability on a project like this. There just isn't enough money to be made in the solar industry to incur unnecessary costs. And finally, the town of Rhinebeck has declared its intent to be a climate-smart community. It's the first step in doing so. There's a series of actions that the town now needs to go through to qualify to be a climate-smart community, like the town of Red Hook is, for example. We think that's consistent with the town's intent to encourage solar and to promote solar, and it would be inconsistent with that whole purpose and the comprehensive plan of the town to say that because a solar system like this is now going to serve other people, it now must be hidden from view. That just doesn't make any sense. So those are kind of the reasons.
Hi, I'm Michael DeCole. I'm the landowner.
First, I got copied on a letter that you guys received from another Mill Road residence, and I was hoping that that could get read into the record, or...
Yes, we do have it from Joel Herm and Susan Hochbaum.
Yes.
443 Mill Road, and it will go into the record.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I wanted to circle back to the point that Jeff made about the 12-foot limit for panels. I've talked to a lot of people who were on the committee that drafted this law, and no one has said that they intended the screening to be meant for roof systems. And the law as it was written is unclear. So we went through a very expensive process of examining what screening would provide for the community and the neighbors. And in no, even the analysis that we presented, which had a very full hedge that many of the neighbors felt was not adequate and would not be adequate in the winter, and it was quite high. None of it screened the roof. This is a 12 to 14 foot tall hedge. In all the pictures, it did not screen the roofs. So I think what we're asking for in this idea of unreasonable is for you to step back and imagine all of the commercial buildings or roof spaces in the town that are large enough to support this kind of system, and whether it's when those systems become available for more than just the landowner or the building owner, that they get shared through the Central Hudson network, that then it should be a right for people to ask for screening of a roof, simply because you're changing the color and texture of the roof. That is what I feel like is unreasonable. Now, we will find in the next decade that in many states now, these systems are required on new construction. They're going to be everywhere. And if we establish that this texture, this look, requires screening because of an interpretation of the law that was never intended to be applied to this use on a roof, we're really backing ourselves into a corner as a community. Now, you guys as a board in the last meeting said that maybe, I think it was the chairperson said, that you can't legislate. This may be something that requires going to the town and getting them to rewrite the law. I think that's a mistake. It is clear from everything that we've presented to you, and for those of you that went to see the actual buildings, you cannot screen roofs effectively to make neighbors who don't like what they're seeing happy. And I'm sorry, you may not like what you're seeing. But the question is whether it's reasonable to ask somebody to screen a roof because they don't like the way it looks, simply because it's a system that's being shared across more than one user. Thank you.
Just a second. Jeff, what is the status with the planning board?
We have an application in front of the planning board for a site plan review and a special use permit, as is required. They've suspended their discussion, waiting for this board to rule on the ZEO's letter. So they're struggling with the screening of this as well.
One of the notations I have is the planning board's visual consultant concluded that the proposed additions are unlikely to have significant visual impact, as it does not increase the building area and increases the building height by no more than 8 inches. Is that's a determination that's in writing?
Yes, that's, we commissioned Saratoga Associates, which is a professional engineering and landscape architecture firm, to do a visual impact study of the systems and to try to figure out what might be possible through reasonable screening to screen these. And as Mike said, just found they couldn't do it within any kind of reasonable cost or effectiveness level.
Excuse me a second. The
yeah.
screening is from the south side towards Rhine Cliff, because if you come from the back of the building, you don't have to screen that because they're angled.
Yes.
The screening that's
South.
been discussed
The
is
screening-
all along the road here. There's a natural hedgerow that's there.
No, but the screening would only have to start where the peak of the second building is going towards Rhine Cliff, because from the back, you can't see the solar panels.
That's true.
Because they're at an angle.
Yeah, so what Mike proposed was a hedge that went from here all the way up here. I think it's like 600 feet or something, 700 or 800 feet long. We proposed maintaining this hedge, which would cost them money and time, and you'd take out the trees and everything, and it will grow to be, what, like 12 feet tall or something like that, basically. But the conclusion was, then the leaves come off.
Yeah.
6 months of the year, the hedge is largely ineffective. But even when the leaves are on, you can't hide the roofs. The hedge needs to be 20 feet tall or 25 feet tall in order to effectively hide all along here, and that's just virtually impossible.
Our presentation, which I think you have a copy of, shows photographs
Yes.
of a fully filled-out hedge that's 12 feet tall. And you can't see the building fronts, but you can see the entire roof surface.
Right.
And the reason is because the land slopes back and up from the road, and the buildings are tall. You have to drive equipment in and under them. That's going to be true of any building with roof size to accommodate a community solar system. Now, the 12-foot limit that the town set on the height of ground-mounted systems was so that they could be hidden behind screening. That's where I look at the law and say, they just weren't even imagining that we'd be having a screening discussion about roofs. And there's a lot of places that Jeff pointed out in the law where it wasn't even a consideration. Most of the systems that are large enough to be put in a community solar box are going to go out on the ground. And they will have to be screened, and I think they should be. It's a very different look than what we're doing.
So, Richard, the letter you're referring to, that was the town's, the planning board's visual impact consultant who critiqued and reviewed the work of our
Right.
visual impact consultant. That was his conclusion, George Janes.
And
It's the town's, but they chose them, we paid for it.
And is there a mechanical building where the solar energy gets converted to electricity with batteries and?
No, there's no batteries. There will be, there'll
The
be an inverter board here
Yeah.
and here, and they're enclosed in a shed. They're
They're in the envelope.
Existing buildings.
under
building.
the buildings. And
So
they're-
they cannot be, well, the
won't
building,
see- you won't
nothing, you won't see anything.
No, they're going to have to be, they're going to have to be enclosed because we got to separate them from animals that are going to be in the field. So they'll have a fence and they'll be enclosed under the building.
One of the things that I was, when I was reading back through all the material, says there's more cutting of existing trees that you're going to do. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So
Where that will happen?
the plan that I developed, I mean, these buildings, with or without solar, I developed a plan with NRCS, Soil and Water. As part of our farm plan, we had their techs come out for a 70-acre rotational grazing setup here using these buildings. And this whole 70-acre field in 19...
That's the field between the two...
That's the field that extends
Okay.
a little bit past this building, and then we've cleared to a tree line roughly to the back of the buildings. It's a little deeper in some places, and there's places where that can go back another few hundred feet. If you look at the 1970 aerial photograph that's available on Google Earth, it shows this field open. And you can see what the original, and then if you go back farther than that,
Right.
and you can see the houses being built that are facing the field in that picture.
But so the additional cutting that you're going to do is between those two buildings?
There's a section here that has not been cleared yet, which, who, did you go out to see the?
Tim and I did.
Yeah, so there's a section of thick young maple and some cedar that's in between the two buildings here, and then there's hardwoods that are farther back that will get cleared out.
And because you're going to build a corral there?
No,
Is that what
this is additional grass grazing between the two
Oh, okay, I
buildings.
thought it talked about another structure that you were going to be putting in there.
No, this is the buildings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We want
So
to
a corral didn't mean a corral in the way that I think about it in the West.
Well, there may be a place with our fencing where we have a smaller catch here closer to the road
Oh, okay.
where we can load and unload animals.
Okay,
But that's just fencing.
yeah.
Yeah.
What size herd are you thinking of?
Well, if the land is, the full 70 acres is cleared, NRCS estimates that it could support a herd between 40 and 50 large animals, and it's a multiplier for sheep or goats.
Yeah,
It's about 1 head per acre
for a large
of
animal.
larger animals. But if you, I mean, and that could be increased depending on how fertile we can get this and the way that we're grazing it. There's a lot of ag about how that could happen.
Right,
The buildings are set up so that we can do what's called mob grazing, where the animals spend a small amount of time in a concentrated area and get moved regularly, and it increases soil fertility and animal health. And
right. Yeah, you talked about that some before. Thank you.
Sir, did you want to?
Good evening, Robert Donaldson. I live on Mill Road. I'm not going to reiterate all the information that I sent to this board. There was a lot of information, a lot of legal information, looking at regulatory policies found in the scenic area statewide significance, the town's LWRP, and even the town zoning code, which is clear. The law does address roofs. And I'm going to ask you to try to disregard that comment that Mr. DeCola said about that he spoke to the people who worked on the law and they were opposed to rooftop. I forget what he said, but that reeks of hearsay. If this was a trial, you know, any lawyer would be standing up saying, objection, hearsay, motion to strike that. Because I didn't hear any of those people complaining about the solar panel law that included rooftops when the law was enacted by this town board. If those people were opposed to the rooftop solar panels, they would have had an opportunity to say, wait a second, we're opposed to that. We're not opposed to it. We're not opposed to solar power. But and this whole issue is not about a green roof versus a blue-colored solar panel. It has nothing to do with it. We're talking about a commercial activity in an agricultural area. Mr. DeCola is right. If he was only going to put up enough solar panels to cover 110% of the agricultural activities on his farm, he wouldn't need any permit. He can go right ahead and do it. We understand that. But those other panels are becoming a commercial activity. A commercial activity, if this board rules against the ZEO's interpretation of the solar panel laws, that could set an ugly precedent, opening up a Pandora's box for all the other scenic roads throughout the town. And remember, there are 15 scenic roads in this town. A number of them are not only designated scenic roads by the town, but also by the state. So what we're asking is that, and it came up at the last meeting, that sections of his property along the road in front of the houses of those people directly affected by it, that the screening be incorporated. It's following the law. And we all said we're in favor of that. We're not asking for total screening from the East Gate entrance all the way down to the end of his property in a northern direction along Route on Mill Road. We're looking for a staggered, all right? And money's not an issue. No, it's not, right? And even if he can't, we're not asking that he put in tall trees that immediately block the roofs, but trees that will grow, that will block it. And we're fine with that. I think that's a fair compromise. And I hope you would agree with that.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
I'm Hannah Barrett. I'm of 317 Mill Road. Of those of you who've done the site visit, I'm the small house right across from the shed that I think is 488 square feet. I wanted to agree with my neighbor, Bob. I feel that this solar installation is part of a commercial activity. It isn't covered by the agricultural exemption, which is really clear that anything beyond what is used by the farm is commercial. And these two sheds have been designed to meet a capacity to provide energy for 30 households. Those of you that saw the roofs, they are very, very large, and they've been built to meet a target. And so it's no wonder that they are a challenge to screen, but I still think that having some trees planted would at least soften the industrial effect. So I think it's more than just changing the color of the roof. I feel that if you look at these buildings, the pitch, the angle, the entire scale is in part a design factor to meet a commercial target. It's not just a matter of switching it from green to black or green to blue. And whether or not ultimately the owner is going to sell the energy, I'm still looking at a piece of architecture that was scaled up to be able to meet that commercial goal. And so I still feel that there's a right, regardless of whether the energy is sold, in that the structure's been designed to meet that. It's still big, and I live on a scenic road, and I would like to enjoy the quality of life of that view. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? If not,
I have one clarifying question. I think it might be for Jeff. I'm not sure. Last time, when we talked about, the economics of this, you had mentioned that you felt that Michael could get a 10 to 12% return on his investment over 25 years. And then today, you said that you thought returns on investment would be 2%. Were you speaking for your business there or for your clients' implementations of solar energy?
I was speaking for our business. If the cost of this project was up by $50,000, we won't do it.
Okay.
We can't afford it.
He doesn't get the same incentives as an installer.
Right, right. But so I just wanted to clarify.
We have to-
The statement that you made before is true.
Correct.
So is this one. They're just two separate things.
But we have to we sell this system, design it, engineer it, build it, permit it, sell it to Mike.
Right,
We have to make a profit. when we
Right.
do that, otherwise we can't do it. So
okay. So you were making a statement about your business, not about his return on investment for this, or what will come back to him as the owner of this solar farm.
I want to address some of the comments about the buildings. The barns that were originally built by Morton for the farm were close to this length. Were close to this length. And they were actually on the riverside of the property. This is not an outsized structure for the number of animals that we're talking about shading. The fact that the buildings are oriented to catch as much sun as possible works for both uses that we're proposing. It works to shade the animals, and it also provides an opportunity to gather the photovoltaic energy. I think that I originally presented the town with both of these plans together, the building and the solar, and was told that the town was busy writing their solar law, so we'd have to come back with that piece. We went ahead and built the buildings because they work for all the things that we need them for that have to do with the ag. Mr. Donaldson is right. We are here talking to you because the solar use on the top 8 inches of the building is not an ag use. But I will also tell you that if you talk to Ag and Markets, they're terrified of all the farm fields of prime farmland in our state that are being converted to solar farms, where the ground, this whole area, is filled with panels because it's more profitable than crops or cows. So you could look at this a couple of different ways. And I would encourage you guys to look at this a couple of different ways. Because if this land is not profitable as ag, it won't stay that way. And it won't stay open. And we're trying to come up with a creative way to keep 70 acres of land that's under incredible development pressure in our town open with animals on it and productive as agriculture. So it's not an agricultural use, this 8 inches that sit on the top, but it sure helps that be a profitable farm venture. And if you talk to Ag and Markets, they love this idea because it doesn't take up the grazing land. Now, he can't, Bob Summers, who's in charge of that legal defense part, can't come out and defend a non-ag use on an ag building. And he won't, and he shouldn't. But it's important to understand the difference between what is actually happening to ag land all over the state and what we're trying to do here.
Thank you. Yes.
So as a neighbor, I don't have any objection to these technologies being combined or mixing commercial with agriculture. I just don't think that the exemption that's strictly for agriculture should be used to bypass conventional zoning and zoning regulations in order to get the project done. I think it would have been better for there to have been public comment as part of the design review for this project from the get-go instead of talking about it post-construction. The agricultural exemption gives a lot of latitude to landowners, and the only public protection is in the narrowness of how agriculture is defined. And if you're going to expand the definition of agriculture to include other industries, such as commercial solar industries, then what does that exemption do, except to give people total carte blanche? So I wouldn't say that, individual regulations within the exemption are too strict. I would say maybe for these projects where multiple technologies are in use, maybe they should just go through normal zoning.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, there's no other comments. We're not going to close the public hearing. I think we're going to continue the public hearing. But John, did we want to ask for any consent concerning the time periods involved?
Can I ask why? Because we're stuck at...
Can I just go, so for timing, when the board closes the public hearing, it kicks off a 62-day clock to issue a decision, and we have to manipulate that within the board's monthly meeting schedule. The clock can be extended if the appellant is willing to consent to that. If you're willing to consent to an extension to let us go a little bit, beyond the 62 days.
Oh, because of when the next meeting?
Yeah, yep. Then we can close the
Then we can
public hearing
close it,
tonight, okay? So, so
Okay.
we'll do that. We may come calling for a letter at some point asking to, okay.
Okay, so then, let's see, if I could have a motion to close the meeting, but with the stipulation that the applicant will consent to extend the 62-day period, not for too long a time, would be for a short time, and the applicant has indicated that he would. So can I have a motion to encompass the above? Go ahead, Jeff.
Would it be possible to specify a number, like 70 days? I mean, if you leave it open, then you just don't, we need some certainty that this won't go on to 120 or 180.
It's not going to, but I don't know the days yet. We have to figure out, now that we've got all the information, we have to sit down and start crunching everything. But you want to move this, and I'm sure everyone wants to move it, and we do too, so it won't drag on for a long time.
All right, can I have a motion, please? Yes, go ahead. No, not at all, go ahead.
So I understand, and I'm new to this, so I'm just sort of listening very intently. So,
Could you just give your name and, yeah,
you want me to set up?
please? Come on.
It's very comfortable then.
Really?
Hi. My name is Susan Ragusa. I live at 337 Mill Road, opposite the east gate of Mr. DeCola's property. So I just want to understand what's happening here. So you'll be closing the hearing to have discussions now among this board, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then at some point, based on the calendar of all the other meetings and committees, you'll come back with another date when we will convene once again, correct?
No, actually, I believe that we'll convene with a decision.
You're going to convene with a decision.
Correct.
So is it possible for you to use that time to do what you have to do and then give us another opportunity when you come back to speak again before you make a decision? And I say that because I reiterate everything that my neighbor said, and we are speaking about the interpretation of a law. And it has such a huge impact in this town with all, I mean, I have a list of all the scenic roads here. And I just feel as if this is happening, and many of the people who live here, my neighbors, my friends, don't know what's happening and what the impact of this will be. And I think it's fair this is a very big issue, and it impacts more than just 6 houses or 12 houses. It impacts 15 roads. And I think that we've been doing this, you know, in the right way, but I don't know that we've been transparent enough. And so that's really all that I'm asking, because it will have such a major impact on a town that we all love. So that's really all that I'm asking.
Do you believe extending the public hearing? That's, I think, all we can do. We have a format that we must follow, and we are following it, and the public was notified, and there's been 2 public hearings. Sometimes there's only 1 public hearing. We've had 2. Do you think more people want to come? I mean, what would be?
I do. I think that because I love living here, and I really believe that as a community, we can make an impact by working together. And I feel that there has not, we've all been alerted.
Is there a reason why they haven't come?
Well, because I don't think the people who live on all these scenic roads were notified what was happening. That's what I'm talking about.
You have to be notified within 500 feet of the property. That's the people who get the actual notice, and then
Yeah.
the town posts a public notice on their website.
So as a result, there's been really no information. In other words, whatever is
But there won't be, other than what the law provides.
What I'm asking is if it is possible for us to speak to those other people and for you to listen to what they have to say as you've listened to us, so that they also have a shot at being able to hopefully keep the law the way it is, so they are not impacted in the way we are. I'm just asking, it's a collaborative, it's something collaborative for all of us who live here, who love living here, and maybe they don't care, but I don't know that they have been informed in a way that I think they should be informed, although I understand what you're saying and I respect the process. So because this has such ramifications, I'm asking that if it is possible to use this time to really put out what's happening here, and when the decision is made, it's a decision that comes from the heart of this town. That's all that I'm asking, and thank you.
If you could just elaborate, though, on how more people will be involved in the process. I don't quite understand.
Well, that's something, I mean, I'm not Jane Jacobs.
Excuse me?
I don't pretend to be Jane Jacobs and, rally the troops and all that. But I do know that there are ways that I did some research on this, and I know that there are ways that people who have lived in towns have gone out in a grassroots fashion to speak to the people who are living on these roads and giving them the information, whatever you have, whatever we have, to apprise them of what's going on, because it does have an impact on all of them. And so I am asking if we could use this time to have a grassroots outreach to those people and give them an opportunity to come here and speak or contact you in whatever way possible. That's what I'm saying, because I know it has been done, and so I'm asking if it's possible for us to do that here in this town.
Well, I think it's for the board to discuss.
Okay.
We can discuss it now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go-
You
yeah.
made a motion to close the public hearing. But before that, you asked if anybody else had anything to say, and there was silence in the room. Everybody who knows about this project has been showing up at planning board meetings for months and months and months. This is an attempt just to delay progress of the project for no other reason. It's because unfortunately she found out that when you close the public hearing, you're going to move to a decision. And that's an attempt to delay.
That's actually not.
We have a right as
You
the
do.
applicant to have a process that gets followed and to see some forward motion on this thing. Everybody's been notified according to the law. We've had 2 public hearings now. People have shown up. People have spoken. And when you ask them if anybody else had anything to say, they said no. You made a motion to close the public hearing. I think you should proceed with the motion to close the public hearing.
Let me ask, if I may, our attorney a question. After public hearing is closed, we can, I assume, still receive comments from the public?
No.
No.
Unless
That's done.
unless you make a motion to extend
This
it.
case is still in front of the planning
Like
board.
extend
So
it.
anybody who wants
Oh,
to speak,
yes.
if she wants to organize a grassroots movement, that she can do it in front of the planning board.
Kim suggested that what is done sometimes is that the public hearing gets closed with a certain number of days left open for written public comment to be, additional written public comment to be submitted, usually like, 10 or 15 days. But then once the record is closed, then you can't receive any more public
So it
comment.
seems to me that maybe, I'll throw this out there, that a compromise might be to close the public hearing and leave open our door for letters for the next 10 days. Because it's not, I don't think it's as if we have failed to provide notice to the public, to show up to public hearings, planning board hearings, right? There's been a lot of openness and transparency so far, and I think a reasonable amount of time for neighbors and others along other roads to have heard about this from those who care. So I guess I'm thinking that moving forward in our process to close the public hearing and get on with our decision-making process and still being able to hear for the next 10 days from the public seems like a reasonable approach.
And I just want to clarify, so once if you were to do something like that, once the 10-day period closed, there could be no additional information received from the public. However, the applicant has right under the law to be able to respond to anything that's raised at the public hearing, and that information would be included in that. So the applicant would have an opportunity, would have to be given an opportunity to
Respond to
review that information and put in anything additional that they thought was appropriate.
So if we should get 100 letters within 10 days or whatever we put a time limit on it, then Michael and Jeff would have time to respond to whatever those concerns were.
Yes, yeah.
John, is it an accurate statement that ZBA usually has one public hearing, but in this case, we've had 2 public hearings over a period of 2 months?
Yes.
Okay. And I believe it began in December.
I mean, we've had very unusual circumstances like Red Wing, where we had
Yes.
like 10
7.
sessions or something.
I would agree with what you had said. My own opinion, I would have a greater time period for the response, more like 3 weeks, because I don't see how it could hurt us to receive something 3 weeks from now, but that's just me. It
Well,
could be 10 days.
here's the only
Right.
thing I want to say about that, is that for you to consider, we can begin to move forward, you can, as in making a decision, but you really can't formulate your judgments about the answers to the questions that are being presented here until all of the information in the record is in front of you. So it does delay, extending that period does delay getting started. And in the meanwhile, we do have by closing the public hearing this evening, the clock starts ticking. So,
Yeah, because of what John just said, and I think the fundamental idea that we need to be fair to all parties, the applicant and the public and the neighbors, it seems to me that having had at least 2 months of public notice and public involvement, that we only should need another 5 or 10 days and not more than that, because then it does eat into our ability to make a good and full decision and the applicant's ability to respond to any comments. So I don't think we do want it to be much longer than, I mean, maybe 10 days is even too long, but we're trying to be fair to all parties.
What was the time frame with the planning board? What were the general time frames when this was before the planning board that the public was aware of?
When you first went before the planning board.
July.
In July, so this has been...
Sure. Yes, so we started in July. And there have been a lot of public discussions about this. I understand your reflex to be as fair as possible to her request for more time. But each stage of this is difficult for us and costs us money. And we've already been incredibly patient and followed this law to this point, which is already an extreme amount of discussion about the very fine details of what's reasonable screening. I don't imagine that if anyone went to all the people on scenic roads to ask them for their comment on what reasonable screening would be for roofs on scenic roads, that you would get a whole lot more information. You might get a lot of people who are really scared that something terrible would happen on their scenic road, but I don't think you're going to get a whole lot more information that's going to be pertinent to making your decision. And to ask us all to wait longer is a burden.
Well, that's why, I think what I'll call the compromise is intended to satisfy you in closing the public hearing, right? We could ask for something like an extension of 15 days or something beyond the 62, and you will essentially have some sort of closure, right, if we close the public hearing today. And as well, offer just a little bit of additional open door to receive comments. Seems like both parties might get their way.
You may feel like it's reasonable, and I understand why you would. I'm trying to express why it feels unreasonable to me, because of all that we've done already. And I get it. My feelings won't be hurt, but you got to hear what we've already gone through,
Right.
which is super significant, and 4 of these meetings, and there'll be more public hearings in front of the planning board once you guys make your determination, and maybe the town will have to change the law, and there'll be more hearings there. There is a lot of time to still discuss this, so that's...
Fair enough.
And
Okay.
and let me just clarify, maybe for myself, and if I'm clarifying it wrong, I hope my other board members will jump in. We're going to be making a determination on whether we think the reading of the law is correct. Whether the zoning
It's an
officer,
appeal.
we're either
That's
agreeing with
correct.
the zoning officer, or we're agreeing with Michael that he doesn't think she read the law right.
Correct.
That's all. We're making no determination on screening, what would be appropriate or not, just an interpretation of the law.
That's
And so
correct.
then, depending on what we do, there's various paths that are open for further discussion and
Beyond
further
this
mitigation
board, beyond
of
this board.
any issues that remain.
The planning board will take your decision, and it'll be up to them to apply it.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
If there was a resolution to close the public hearing, did either you or Tim have any thoughts, if you were in agreement with that, about a time period to leave the window open for others to submit in writing?
Let me just ask, partly for clarification, we were trying to schedule our closing of this issue within our next 2 meetings, right?
Yes.
And the February meeting there's about a 10-day difference already between now and a month later. So I would think if we said 2 weeks or something, because then that's still, everything has to come in before we get to our February meeting. Before that, and because we want to be able to close within 60 days, which would be the March meeting.
Yeah. Well,
Something,
you are, we'd like to give you some guidance on just some of the basics for.
No, that's right. No,
and-
we have to schedule that in there somehow, you
yep.
know.
And then, you have to get that, you have to have your deliberations, and then the decision has to be written down. So
I think anything
what I'm
less
just trying to explain is from the board standpoint, there's actually quite a bit, you've received a lot of information from everybody in connection with this, and that you got to digest that, and you've got to formulate your opinions with regard to that. We're going to tell you a little bit about the law, and then you got to put it all together. You actually have quite a bit of ground to cover, even if we just started today, so.
Okay. I'm fine, I would be fine with 10 days. I think something less than that is not meaningful. You know, I think something between 10 and 15 days.
I'll make a resolution, a motion for a resolution, is that the meeting be closed pursuant to our discussion, and that residents be given an opportunity to submit written findings to be received by Chris and by the board within 14 calendar days of tonight, and that the applicant be provided any of those documents, and that he be given an opportunity to respond within a reasonable time, but a very short time period, but a reasonable time, and that the 62-day period after the closure of the meeting be extended without a date, but again, within a reasonable short time.
Given that there's a 5-week period between this meeting and the next one, I think that's reasonable.
All right, that's my motion. Do I have, well, any discussion? It's very important to discuss this.
I just want to make it,
Yep.
can we just make a clarification? So my quick calculation is you're talking about extending it until January 22nd. And so let's say your motion says that the closure is 5 PM on January 22nd.
Right. It has to be received.
Yes.
By us. Right.
And can we change the baseline 62 days to 69 days?
I'd rather not have a date because of what John has been
Well,
expressing.
the 62-day period is set in the law.
Okay, so that occurs a week before the March.
And that's why we may need to have the extension to get us past the March meeting.
Right.
Richard, I mean, I'll just throw my 2 cents in.
Please.
I'm sensitive to the applicant's point that they've been doing this since July, and the fact that we need time to make a good decision, consult with the attorney, understand the law, and make the decision. So I think 14 is a little too much. I was thinking actually in the interim here that maybe giving it just till next week, which was actually going to be the day of this meeting, might be enough on its own, which is 7 days.
Friday, January 18th, Friday of next week, would be 9 days. So if we made it at the
end of next
end
week.
of the day, at the end of.
I'm more
the day
comfortable
on
with that
Friday.
than longer, but, so. that's
All right,
my 2
why don't we
cents.
run through with the motion, my motion, and if it's defeated, that's understandable, then I'll bring your
Fair
motion.
enough, okay.
All right, so I have a motion for a resolution pending. If there's no second, I'll move on. Do I hear a second? There is no second. So, David, do you want to make your
Sure, so.
Motion.
Propose that the public hearing be closed, but that we allow for receipt of commentary from the public through next Friday, 5 PM.
Next Friday being January 18th.
Sorry, January 18th at 5 PM.
Okay, and the other conditions which were in the first, my resolution, the first resolution, that the meeting is going to be closed tonight, the time period you just set forth and the time period for an extension of the decision will go past the 62 days to a reasonable time period, short
And-
time
and
period.
time
And
for-
also the appellant will have the opportunity to respond also within a reasonable time period. In writing, yes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. I want to thank everyone for their input.
Civil discussion.
And yes, and civil discussion is right. Okay. All right, the last thing is under old business, the Gerber Stanford Court matter. That was, resolution was drawn up by me, so I'll read that. That's case ZBA number 974, Thomas J. Gerber Revocable Living Trust. Whereas the applicant appellant is Peter Andros Consulting Engineer, representing the owner, Thomas J. Gerber Revocable Living Trust, referred to as the applicant. This appeal is from the Town of Rhinebeck Building Inspector's initial denial dated October 11, 2018. The property involved is located on the northeast corner of U.S. Route 9 and Stanford Court in the Town of Rhinebeck, and which bears the tax parcel number set forth in the resolution. The applicant's property is 2.61 acres in an RC5 district. The owner is Peter J. Andros. The owner is represented by Peter, who is an engineer. The applicant's project is designated as follows. Applicant is seeking to construct a single-family dwelling on a pre-2009 approved subdivision lot. Lot was originally an R1A zoning district, and the building envelope approved in the 1988 subdivision was within R1A setbacks. Following the 2009 zoning change, the RC5 zoning district site for the house no longer met all setbacks. The sewage disposal system originally approved as part of the subdivision is still in force. It has been renewed every 5 years and is current. The applicant requires 2 area variances, front yard setback RC5 100 feet, requested setback of 50, so the variance equals 50 feet. The second one is the rear yard setback in an RC5 is 50 feet, the requested is 47, requiring a variance of 3 feet. The appellant filed the appeal on October 15, 2018, and paid the requisite fee. The appeal was filed within 60 days of the date of the CEO's decision, and thus the application is timely as required. On November 14, 2018, this board deemed the application to be complete and accepted it for review. SECRA, after accepting this appeal, we determined that this matter should be classified as Type 2 under the State Environmental Quality Review Act because the project involves granting of 2 variances, and this section is set forth in the resolution. No further review is required pursuant to SECRA. Referrals and responses. Dutchess County Planning Board determined that this application was not required to be referred to Dutchess County Department of Planning and Economic Development pursuant to 239M of the New York State General Municipal Law and 125E of the Town of Rhinebeck zoning law. The Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board, as required, this application was referred to the Town Planning Board, and the Town Planning Board did respond in December 17th of last year. Planning Board recommended the ZBA rely upon its own study of the facts in deciding the application in accordance with the criteria and procedures set forth in Town Code Chapter 125, including the input of neighbors. The Planning Board found the requested area variances raises no significant planning or environmental issues. The Town Rhinebeck Conservation Environment was not required. The Town Rhinebeck Waterfront Advisory Committee, this was required to be referred to them, and it was. And it does, all right, the matter was referred and a response received on November 27th, 2018, indicating they do not anticipate any area of concern. A public hearing was held here on December 19, 2018. There were no comments from any member of the public during the course of the public hearing. Site visit on January 3rd, myself and Tim visited the property and the surrounding neighborhood to observe firsthand on-site conditions, property characteristics, settings, surroundings, environment, and the character of the surrounding neighborhood. The purpose of this site visit was to observe the property and the surrounding area and to inform the board members with the upcoming decision. The site visit was conducted solely to gather information, and no business or deliberations were conducted during the site visit. Findings of fact and conclusions of law. In our review of the variances sought, we have considered the benefit to the applicant if the area variances are granted as weighed against the detriment to the public safety and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant. We determined that the variances requested should be granted because there is no detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by granting this variance. In our review of the variances, we have considered the 5 factors required by 125124C1 of the Town of Rhinebeck zoning code as follows. A, if the variances are granted, will they cause an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood or cause a detriment to nearby properties? We find the answer to this question is no. An undesirable change will not occur in the character of the neighborhood or cause a detriment to nearby properties by granting of these variances. The neighborhood defined as the Meadows is a single-family subdivision almost completely built out. The proposed variances will allow construction of a single-family home dwelling similar in size and shape to the existing houses in the subdivision. The proposed yard distances are sensitive and compliant to nearby developed properties and will not create any undesirable changes or detriment to those surrounding properties. Can the benefit sought by the appellant be achieved by some method feasible for the appellant to pursue other than an area variance? We find this question, the answer to this question, no. When the subdivision was first created back in 1988, the building envelope was based on the existing setbacks at the time of the zoning district. Furthermore, the size of the single-family home must be at least 2,000 square feet based on the declaration of restrictions found in the approvals. In 2009, the zoning law changed the zoning district to RC5 and increased the required setbacks. The proposed home will be 2,090 square feet, barely meeting the required minimum size of the house. In order to accommodate the required size of the home and be within the building envelope, the applicant cannot meet the setbacks under the current zoning law based on the revised setbacks from 2009. Zoning law change the applicant's building element would make it impossible to build. The applicant is also restricted by wetlands and a culvert. Thus, the applicant requires these variants to build these proposed home. C, is the requested area variance substantial? We find the answer to this question is no. The yard variances requested are consistent with the building envelope in the R1A zoning district, which apply to the majority of the homes that have been constructed in the Stanford Court neighborhood. The front yard setback is similar to that of the existing single-family home immediately adjacent to and east of the property and is not substantial when considered within the constraints of the neighborhood. D, will the proposed variances have an adverse impact or physical environmental conditions of the neighborhood or the district? We find the answer to this question is also no. The applicant has a tree line which sets the dwelling apart from Route 9. The dwelling will create no appreciable impact on traffic. There will be no impact on drainage or wetlands since, as shown in the plan, the 100-foot wetlands buffer will be maintained. E, is the alleged difficulty self-created? No. The applicant's building envelope under the revised code would make it impossible to build. The applicant is also restricted by the culvert in the wetlands. In addition to our review of the 5 factors in balancing test, we must determine if these requested variances represent the minimum variance necessary and adequate to accomplish what is requested by the applicant, and that also preserves and protects the character of the neighborhood and the health, safety, and welfare of the community. We find the answer to this question is yes. No, that should be taken out because this is not an addition, it's a new house. A result of the balancing test. Based on analysis of the 5 factors discussed above and the consideration of having the minimal variance request, we find that the balancing test favors granting the area variances sought. Now, therefore, be it resolved, based on the facts described above, the ZBA hereby grants 2 area variances. Front yard setback is 100, the requested is 50, so it's a 50-foot variance. Rear yard setback is 50, requested is 47. It's going to vary 3 feet. The variance is 3 feet from the zoning code, finding that the benefit to the applicant outweighs any detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such a grant. Our decision is supported by a balancing of the 5 factors discussed above. The ZBA hereby grants the variance from the zoning law, subject to the applicant's full payment to the town of Rhinebeck of any and all fees and escrows deposits due in connection with this application. The granting of the variance does not absolve the applicant from having to secure any other required permits or approvals. Section 4, it has to be commenced within 1 year, or it'll be null and void. And that is the resolution.
Or it will also be, unless the proposed construction is to move? Not addition?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Sorry.
Yep.
Maybe you said that.
No, I did not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we strike the last sentence of section 2? It's redundant.
Yes.
Yeah, this property is 2.16 acres, that one?
No, section 2.
On page 5?
It should not be-
Oh, I'm in the whereas, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Section 2.
Page 5. Yeah, that's,
I'm sorry, I don't have, section 2 under 15, okay. 15-2,
yep, that's it.
yep.
All right. And
You'll give
go
it
ahead.
that question mark.
It's a question mark instead of a quote on,
Yeah.
right above that fee reimbursement.
Yep, that should
And
be,
the formatting of section 1, these tab over to the left,
Right, move that out,
that's why you couldn't find it.
yes.
Kim, I want to thank you for your input. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Motion to approve?
All right, do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion,
Is Kim
resolution.
polling us on this?
Ms.
Yeah.
Leopold, Kim Albert, Catherine Hart,
Aye.
Samantha Lucia, and Dave Clark.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I believe we're up to the adjournment. Do I have a
make a
motion?
motion to adjourn.
Oh, Catherine, thank you.
Second.
Second, thank you. And all in favor? Yes,
Aye.
thank you.
No.
No. Thank you all.